crickets will play. And actually, they're getting louder, it seems. A little weather warming up. Springtime for the sheep. It's their year, folks. Springtime for the sheep. If you look around, if you understand a little bit about Chinese New Year's, you might, and the way they change that around, and you look at the characters and the story behind all that, you might find that there's some interesting lessons to learn about the dynamics of different characters and capabilities. And from what I've been looking around, and though I haven't had a whole lot of time, I'm really just some spurious time to look around quickly as it kind of interjected my mind and kept going. This is the last few weeks since our judgment was pretty well perfected by the federal court. And a lot of things just came up on the table to have to be done all at one time. I really haven't had too much time, but it's always fascinated me about the Chinese and how long-standing their culture has been, as interfered with and as political as it got and has gotten. They've had a long run of time to observe we the people of the world all over, at least in their setup. But if you look at what's going on, this year of the sheep, so-called, is not so bad, actually. So those of you that have been fighting and working and diligently persisting, continue. This is the year. That I don't know, that I'm just not going to come easy. But we might see some real fruition to our work, especially those of you that have been working been working for about around 7 years. There's an interesting time schedule. So I would take heart and continue. And I can just tell you, it's interesting, the coincidence. How closely upon this changing of time, and I know this is just all speculation at some point, conjectural, but the work that we've been doing for quite a long time is coming around. In obvious ways, in irrefutable ways, even though there's not a direct connection. So we've learned to take wins in different ways. We look to take the win where an oppression removes itself, instead of just being called out and criminalized. We've learned to take the win when the oppression gets lifted after you said stop, and they do, but they don't get, the attacker's still there, but they've backed off. That's somewhat of a win in the world, dog-eat-dog world. That's a big win. That doesn't happen unless you step up, unless you do something. That this year of the ram, the year of the sheep, is a very interesting year for seeing things happen. And as I said, our lawsuit pops through, and look at the news. A governor gets deposed right on the subject matter of the suit to enjoining it. It's now shown to be interstate, which is if you look at the United States of America, it's the old way. It's a nations. These states were actually countries, nations amongst themselves, federating. Yeah, federalizing is the other way. It's the central control, and actually went interstate, international when these compacts, these unconstitutional compacts are brought into the bear. You see how quickly your whole constitutional nature of your government establishments and institutions and protections, essentially, and ultimately down to where you live, are interfered with by these interstate compacts. Why it was so important that there be some oversight to people, even in the ideological sense, the utopian sense of the states being separate and sovereign. They aren't, and they can be, and we see today how that plan is and has been subverted. That I just want to encourage people that are in this, grabbing the rope where they can and holding on for dear life and tugging for all they're worth, just continue. And if you don't understand the power that we have behind the Woodshed, I'm a little busy this week, so it's going to take me about a week to get to it. I'm going to show you the power that we have to bring to bear. All y'all in Britain, I'm going to cause the sun to go out on you. I'm going to take the sun away for a couple minutes to show you how far my reach is behind the Woodshed. So right around next week, about Friday, expect the sun to go out. The first time this century, I'm going to do that. They call those eclipses. And I'm going to cause one. So you better make sure you all listen behind the Woodshed after that. And no, I won't be taking any heads or making any sacrifices. Taking the light out, causing your solar panels to not have any power for 2 minutes should be plenty power transmission for me behind the Woodshed to tell you how all-powerful being behind Woodshed is. Vladimir Putin. Interesting developments have happened since last week, and I have to wait to get to the new conversation each week. As I keep telling you, look out in the world. There's a thing going on, and you need to be able to pay attention to it, because it's actually referencing tactics and styles and statesmanship and all kinds of things that are going on around us. Apparently, if you haven't heard, Putin hasn't been heard from for about 10 or 11 days now. Coincidentally, it came not after that Nematov guy got taken out. It happened after he disappears, so-called. He goes underground, if you will, after it's found out someone in the Kremlin was collaborating with the hitmen, at least the alleged hitmen. Now, I don't have more of an observation than y'all, and the secret's been pretty good, and so now the rumor mill starts. And I've got a couple links. I'm not going to journey too deep. We just don't know, but there's something afoot, folks. And I don't mean just because the guy's gone silent. I mean there's some international dynamics that are happening. And I guess you can go off on the rumors of whatever you want to believe, but there is something underneath the skin of all this. He just didn't go under just for nothing. Once they found out that there was someone in the Kremlin, I think they had to go to some introspective review. Now, whether or not that means heads roll, I don't know. But that was all too highly consistent together that something's afoot. And I think they found out the infiltration into the Russian government is even more than maybe they had been able to predict. So I'm not going to tell you what's happening. I also know, though, it's in the news, at least by what we're told in the news, that about this time, I don't know if you're aware of it, but Russia invited Kim Jong-un from Korea over to visit him May 1st or so. I think it's going to be their Independence Day, and they've accepted. So that's in the future, but a secret arrival shows up this week in the prime minister or something of Korea. I can't remember now who it is. It's a foreign minister, actually, Ri Su-young. He arrived in Moscow just a couple days ago in an impromptu meeting, and this was a bit of a surprise. Coincidentally, all of a sudden there's pictures on the internet of the Red Square being filled up with trucks and material, building platforms and things going in, and floors. Which, when I saw that, wasn't so sinister anymore. If they're going to take a whole month to prepare for a potentially very big deal with North Korea, when this is geopolitically, they're trying to make sure that they have very solid ties where they may not have had them before. This could just be a preparatory action that we see in pictures to May 1st, just to welcome and to solidify relationships. There's a whole lot going on all at once that nobody really understood. That the silence behind where Putin is should indicate that the governments don't really know what they think, and they're telling us they think they know. And this gets me back to wanting to tell you, be careful of what we're told. Be careful on what you buy into, and just take a look. What I want you to observe, if you can do so, for what we have, when it finally all comes out, start working backwards to what these things do, how these techniques work. We'll find out whether or not ultimately, because they're supposed to come up tomorrow night. For them, it's Monday night. They're going to be coming out with the answer, I guess. Something's coming up, big announcement around whatever. I don't even know if it's even over his silence. For all we know, he went on vacation. That nothing more is going to happen, and all they're doing is making some kind of a celebratory type construction in Red Square at this point. And this is just a bunch of hype, notwithstanding that apparently Russia asked the news reporters and journalists to stick around. They wanted them to be available. So, whatever gameplay is going on there or not, whatever's real, some very interesting dynamics are happening, all consistent with the killing of, I think it's Neptov, his name. Don't know all these people, don't keep up with it. But there's a dynamic in the world going on. I think Russia just killed the EU agreement to not go to nuclear power. In fact, they've eliminated that. They're calling new nuclear missiles into existence. I don't know if everybody missed the United States bringing another B-52 online from mothballs. The Chinese are stepping up with another aircraft carrier. They brought their own advanced systems online. And so the drumbeat toward the war that was declared by Jordan is moving silently forward. It made perfect sense to me right at the moment that it happened, that when Putin was went silent and went underground, if you will. I don't think he did. I think he's working hard. I think something's up. They're figuring stuff out. They're rooting out whatever problem they had. And they're solidifying alliances. And because of what the United States is doing in Ukraine as well, physically moving troops into that area, they're on a war footing. Don't blink, folks. This is not a good situation. And it's not a good situation even if they come out tomorrow night and say, oh, this is just a celebration. We're welcoming the premier there of Korea or whatever next month. There is things going on behind the scenes of this. There is a definite threat, I think, that Putin figured out within the Kremlin that maybe they didn't see, but got called out because of this murder that happened in another place. I mean, not another place, not in the building, but I mean right outside. Against the guy that got murdered, assassinated, was an expendable feature. We were told a whole lot about him, but it really wasn't he wasn't really any political force in effect. He certainly was no longer really a threat to Putin, but he was somebody that they could call out. And as I reported here, nobody was actually believing that Putin was behind that guy's assassination. And so that's where it seems to devolve. They didn't quite have the Putin's been doing a great job. I told you when he's been doing this gamemanship. He did a great job to explain to his people where their people are at. That's something the United States of America, the Americans, those that you want to call yourself that, you're not being told the truth of much of anything. You're not going to be fortified in a belief that your leaders, so-called, are protecting you one little bit. That you're doing everything to be protective of you. In fact, you're looking around and finding out that there's nothing protective of you. In fact, you're finding out that, and it hits the news finally, what have we been saying behind the woodshed, and not only here, but just about everywhere else that has some critical brain cell left to think, be used to think on these things. The CIA, cash is ending up in coffers of Al-Qaeda. It's now out. These reports are out. People are getting the information about it. I won't even go through all the discussion and reading about it. It's just, you can pick this up. You'll find these links in the blogcaster. They just happen to be gotten by Al-Qaeda. The whole thing here is, again, another whitewash. It's a denial. When you're not seeing the United States actually step up and admitting to these things, these are continuing denials, and I won't go on and on. You're seeing it now. If we didn't have we had a question before. I hope these are removing your questions. I hope these are getting you to stop focusing on all the drama and actually start moving yourself into something that is more effective for you. That's in part why I focus locally, and my local happens to be it's a lot. We hit locally, but it affects nationally, and for what I deal in, it doesn't go global because we're dealing particular to public land disposal, so that we can't go national. But we go international in that what we're doing blocks the international soft law. So you can be a pebble in the pond that by the time it reaches the other shore becomes the tidal wave, the tsunami. If you just keep, as we know resonance will, keep hitting with the same amount of force in a rhythm, keep hitting the same point on and on and on, and persist, and don't let up. The amount of energy you're putting into that system starts to build, is additive and multiplicative to the resonant energy you put to it, the consistent energy you put to it. And this is on lots of levels. And I want to point out in particular, the real power behind what you get to do is when you go find out the black and white of what you're dealing with, and you stay within those parameters, that's your tuner. That's the tuning. And when you stay in there, when you keep persisting, that's the frequency you're putting out. And I was able to see that Congress fulfilled its obligations in certain instances in public lands. We stay right in that congressional intent and objective and purpose, and there is nothing that can come against that, except an abject tyranny, occupation, treason. And so that, once you see that, it defines it, doesn't it? It's not that hard. But you have to be right on the point. You have to be able to see that the United States is not the white knight. And that reflects on us as the people. And we may not have a direct handle on that, but we have a cumulative handle on that. But a direct angle, we can start locally to start giving ourselves the people in place, no different than a guerrilla warfare internal to the system that went corrupt, to start reflecting back out that we're not going to take this. And that's up to us, as I've been saying over and over. I don't know what more to say on that point. The silent war against us is won by our silence. Now, we see what's going on back in Washington, and I tell you the same type of skullduggery is going on in a local government. And I say that, and we proved it, they've agreed to that in our lawsuit, that we can press forward, and I can assure you that your good work will not go in vain if you just start doing what you feel you need to do. Don't make an excuse that it won't work. Make it work. Don't make an excuse that no one will listen. Make them listen. When I say make them, find out the communication techniques that they receive your information. Don't force it. And you impose upon them their moral obligation to listen. In other words, when we go to the black and white and we say the law, let me just put it out in the context of public land management. With the Forest Service, Congress mandated that the Forest Service shall do a certain thing, and they're not doing it. You just stay on that shall, and there's nobody that can come against you. They may be the criminal and not listen, but there's no one that you can assail you. You don't get into these discussions of the logical fallacy and whether or not you're bringing the right argument and whether or not someone's going to listen to it or not. You find the people that are duty-bound to listen and fulfill that, and you stay right there, and you don't get into these nuances. You don't get into these discussions that are people that are trained to drag you off your point anyway. I also have a link on this CIA death thing with the government. Just noticing the money happens to get to Al-Qaeda. There's documentation. So those of you that are understanding about the bag of facts, the bag of law, the bag of reality, the bag of presentation, the black and white you bring together to bear so that no one can come against you. Here's documentation for those of you that want to take it on and want to go after that. To me, I don't know if I have much energy to even think about who would be interested in that. Maybe you are. I want you to see that in the news is information that no FOIA, you don't have to spend the time it takes through FOIAs to get this stuff. As a FOIA becomes a right to get access with exceptions, and then that, if you don't understand it, it's also a delay tactic, and so you better have some other ways to get at this. I won't go through all that. That just comes to you as a matter of doing these things, and I say that, and I have to say that with a grain of salt. I know that that's not so obvious either. Daily, I'm talking with people and explaining, I guess, not so obvious things and opportunities. Because I have to be explaining that these opportunities to get information, to find information, what information, how information ties together. I have to explain this to a lot of people. To me, I don't know why, it just seems to be how I understand things. That's the little niche I guess I fulfill. And that's part of I see when I'm talking to people. I say, well, you just have to get involved, and once you get involved, the information will be there. And I'm saying that knowing that if they're going to get involved and they're knowing me, they're going to eventually call me and say, okay, I'm ready to commit. How would you approach this? What's been your take? What information do you have to start me on this way? And I already know, so I don't overwhelm people. I don't talk about that until they commit. See, if we don't find people that commit, there's no sense in wasting your time. And that's how you can test yourself. Are you committed, or are you wasting your time? And I don't have a judgment one way or the other. That's up for each one of us. We can make all the excuses not to do something. That's the easy part. It really is hard to motivate yourself. Who wants to go to war? Who wants to go to war when you're actually underarmed, undercovered, undertrained, and have to do that all yourself while you're going to the war? While you're in it, as you start to find out. So it's coming out, as we've been saying, that the government is a tool. Al-Qaeda is a tool. It is a tool for what something I can't understand is any good. We were told, and the wisdom is for us, because we were supposed to be a much better example in the world historically. The United States of America was not to get into foreign entanglements. And I understand there hasn't been a war in this country for, 26 out of its entire 200-something, 60-year existence, or whatever the hell at the time is we've been around. That didn't last too long. And that's our problem today. Now, whether or not this fulfills Armageddon, well, I don't know. Maybe that's why we're kind of beating our head up against a big brick wall until that resolves itself. I don't know. But I think if we don't come out with the proper observations and we don't engage, if we engage with the drama and we pull ourselves down by doing that, we aren't taking that example that we need to be available to and have available to us when we're not going to be the center in the United States of America, at least the center of Armageddon that way, but the ramifications of that will hit us. And if we're not prepared for that, if we don't have a better thought in our brain, if the party is not BYOB like it is behind the woodshed, bring your own brain to this new coming awareness and response, we are defeated. It really doesn't matter. That's not an excuse. That's just the fact. We either decide to get in the game here, such that it is, or it comes and overwhelms us. It by natural law. Everyone wants to start promoting this natural law. By natural law, you will be run over and covered over because you didn't essentially cut yourself a surfboard, wax it up, and get on the dang thing and learn how to ride it fast. So we find out that the government is everywhere doing its dastardly deeds, and we don't hear crickets, folks. We're not doing what we need to do to stop a lot of this stuff. We then go ahead and accept a lot of the tools and toys that makes it easy for them, and then you find out that, like I said, we'll hopefully come to the story here and eventually. That's already past news, but I wanted to point out something about it. We are living NDAA and don't really realize it. In the United States of America, you are indefinitely detained and don't know it. You're only existing and moving about at the pleasure of those who decided that you're not quite important enough for the agenda. That we now find mysterious spy cameras collecting data at post offices. So you can look around, folks. You probably find now they're not making it here. They go to Britain, they make them obvious. They put them everywhere. Millions and millions of cameras. Here they're figuring out, well, we better not make it so obvious. In Denver, within an hour of a Fox 31 Denver discovering a hidden camera which was positioned to capture and record the license plates and facial features of customers leaving the Golden Post Office. The device was ripped from the ground and disappeared. Won't go on. The point is that this is a government service, this is a government agency who will not discuss why there was a hidden camera sitting right there taking pictures of and using facial recognition technology. You've heard about all that. That now we are finding out how well surveilled we are becoming. Now, my view a little bit on this is that the news found it. It's probably letting its notice. It's telling you, we're here doing this way. And what that does, but for a few of us, everybody will agree eventually and just let it happen. They have to break down in an American psyche something that beyond people, then they've done a good job of it. It's not like they can't and that they aren't, but they have to break down your initial resistance by just letting you know something's out there, and then there's this human frailty we have. that we start to accept it. Now, this ripping out of the camera appears to be not by somebody finding the camera and then ripping it out. It seems to be that either the post office or the company that put it there was going to be found out for something that they didn't want to be found out for, and so they ripped it out, and then they're not talking about it. And we got a little bit of this notice quite a few years ago in side stories about cameras being in the post office anyway. So, enough on that. This is a federal, whether or not it's ceded federal land in a post office or rented federal land where there's no cession of the land that the post office sits on. This company, the Postal Service, is not the post office. And look very carefully for that distinction. But the Postal Service is simply just a federal company. And they are doing things that give information directly to other agencies and so-called under law have the right to do so, that if you're not aware, they're using everything you need to do in life as a surveillance point. This is not really new news, but now we've got confirmation again. Now, with all the ever-encroachment and going on by the government, as we hear, it's like it's unleashed, folks, and no one's stepping up to stop it. And what's interesting is I bring to you each week people who do lawsuits, who do call out in certain ways, who do make a ruckus over improprieties, and you see that they do stop it. Whoever it was that stopped Common Core in Missouri, that judge said that's interstate compacts are unconstitutional. Well, heck, that's the same thing that's going on over here on the West Coast, and that's the same thing that the Interstate Climate Change Compact is doing internationally. That's as unconstitutional. What I find interesting is the system, unless you go sue that directly, well, they don't listen. They're not listening quite yet to us because we're yet into the enforcement stage. But you'd think that a judiciary interested in judgment would step up when they found out in the news, because they have to take cognizance. The courts are supposed to take cognizance of all this. You'd think they'd have stepped up and went immediately on their own action and outlawed an interstate compact that they found was done in the news, verified its existence, and then by their own mandamus ordered it void. This would be the government working to protect you, and when it's not, that should be one of your first discussions about why not. And then you should point out the fact of the actual proper application of the black and white and say, you need to bring this back in to where it is within this framework. And I have to say, and I've said it before, and I'm seeing it more and more, I don't really know that any of us listening to me, I don't care how old you are, have actually lived in the society, in the creation as it was established and supposed to be, where government actually had that limited form and actually did what it was supposed to do, as we can see evidences of, decided and declared in the Declaration of Independence. And so, because we're not really we're not being responsible to that for ourselves, and as I tell you, international law is always regarded, and I didn't learn that. If I didn't know it before, I learned it again and confirmed by that Kansas versus Colorado case in 1907. You can go find that and read that yourself. International law is always regarded. Why I was telling you the NDAA memo was so important, that when it even would not recognize the limitations of the oxymoronic law of war called the Lever Code of international law, you are well and again outside of any concept of or limited, organized, established government. That crickets, folks. I tell you, that's why I started doing cricket. That's when I started doing the crickets. It was just so clear that we're seeing more and more and more encroachment, and no one's really understanding how to get at it. And to me, I can't say I have the answer to get at it, but at least I have something in my brain, in my mouth to say, to challenge. And you got to do that first challenge. That where it's okay to put these surveillance cameras everywhere, when you go and do it, the government's going to come back in wherever that happens and try to shut you down. They're trying to do it with your phones. They're trying to make it illegal to video cops. They're trying now here, the FAA is going to be banning, and it says it's illegal to post drone videos on YouTube. But drone striking Americans is going to be authorized, right? I mean, this is the whole point about this incongruity. Now, where is that anywhere in the establishing documents if you don't think you're living in an occupied territory that isn't going to look at anything until the people step up and force it and then kick it out? If you're like millions of other drone hobbyists in America, and if you're not even so, listen to the dynamic here so that you understand what's going on. Why? Because they're infringing on you even if you don't have a so-called drone. We used to call these radio-controlled airplanes, radio-controlled boats, radio-controlled cars. Now they're drones. I find this just fascinating. And they cause trouble. It's not like I'm going to agree to this imposition, this ban. I don't agree with someone not respecting my privacy and using a drone with a camera to come around at all. I don't agree with that at all. But that's not the point here. The FAA is going to step in because it apparently believes it has authority to tell you that you can't videotape something and then inadvertently have somebody else that you post like YouTube or Google put a little ad up to make it a commerce connection. Notwithstanding that they've already deemed the internet to be commerce, and now that you've allowed it to be a utility because you didn't step up and flood the administration of the FCC with comments to put them on notice, you're going to sue them over this interference with your right to speak and choosing the medium in which to do it. But the FAA is going to say that you cannot post captured videos on YouTube. And that if you do, you may very well get a legal notice from the Federal Aviation Administration. Under an existing FAA guidelines, see these stories, even if this is someone who doesn't know, is telling you the right words. This is not law. This is a guideline. Flying a drone for personal use, not private use, but personal use is completely legal, as is recording video of your drone flight. But if you use the drone for commercial purposes, say, for example, to record an aerial view of a real estate property listing, then you'd be breaking the law. Well, they said it was a guideline, so how's it breaking the law? This is just an administrative imposition. So what have I told you? When you get your notice, what does that mean? It means that's your first step, that you are enjoying due process, and that's the first step of due process before an administrative agency. Notice means you have what? Opportunity to respond. Here, what is due process reduced to? Its most simplest basis is notice, opportunity, time to respond, and a place to respond. And if you're provided that, and you are typically in any notice, your due process to that point has been fulfilled. If you don't answer, do not take up the opportunity to respond in the time provided, whether it be in the letter or on statutory terms or by some other agreement, and you don't respond to the proper place, why, when you do your administrative comments, they tell you better send it here, and if it doesn't come here, we're not going to watch it. This is your due process. Notice, opportunity, time, and place. Your notice is your opportunity, if you chose to take it, to respond to their assertions that their guidelines conditions your life somehow. And they're claiming in this article, the FAA has just found another loophole in drones. It turns out that if you record a drone flight video and post it on a YouTube, you can be breaking the law if an automatic advertisement is launched within the video. Now, I don't know that that's ever been tested. I think that's an assertion. According to the FAA, not a judicial discussion and determination where you did the right argument and not one an attorney would do to allow this nonsense on you, unless it makes a name for the one who's representing you. Again, you're dealing with a professional association, no different than any other, the political parties, no different than any other association in legal land, that is just saying and conditioning your statements and what you do. They're in a legal association is sitting in the seat of decision over this. That is already telling you you're in commerce, isn't it? Just that they are deciding it. to show you how messed up this whole thing has been, and we just let it go. Crickets, folks. We just are crickets about this. What our lawsuit did was expose, because we're looking very carefully at jurisdiction, and we didn't turn from the point until it was established. And we challenged every time it was trying to be a foreign jurisdiction, incompetent to the cause, was asserted. This is the first thing you do, and it's the thing you hold on for dear life in your suits or your administrative processes. But the FAA is asserting that these advertisements over in a medium that's over your video, whatever it is, I'm saying for you, whether or not it's commercial, is sufficient to bring you into non-compliance of a guideline. Now, let me move on. You can get the link to this later. What I want to point on is the nuts and bolts of some of this and give you some idea that we're not helpless. That we are imposed by what I consider on the property side, and the constitutional side, a wrongful administrative imposition. But it's in a narrow subject matter area. It's still wrongful, and to me, the color of authority imposing upon me to have to respond where I wouldn't otherwise, without that mischaracterization, fraudulent representation, that's a violation. That's a felony. That's a theft by extortion. It interferes with a right that you have, or a property that you have, under color of authority. And it takes that right away or hands it to somebody else. That's another felony. Or it omits to tell the proper interpretation of law and imposes that on you. That's a felony. There's possibly 3 or 4 felonies just in this act alone, and I hear crickets on this. Now, let me read from the letter that they show, just to touch a couple things. This office has received a complaint regarding your use of an unmanned aerial vehicle, aka drone, for commercial purposes, referring your video on the website YouTube as evidence. Not is evidence, it's as evidence. And it's their interpretation. And they've now named your vehicle. If you name something, you own it, folks. And so here's the jurisdictional statements, or what they purport to be authorizing by their determination of your private property. This is personal property they're talking about. That's person is a business. It's a legal entity. They are defining your private property by their terms in this first paragraph. That you would respond to that and contend that they had no authority, and where I would actually ask them, show cause why you haven't committed a felony under color of authority to rename my private property an unmanned aerial vehicle, aka drone. Show cause how you have authority, produce the proof how you have authority to impose a commercial purpose on my use of my private property. That's 2 right in that first paragraph. Do you think that way, folks? Well, if you don't, you have to start thinking this way. And there's a couple more things. I won't belabor all this. I just want to point out to you how I read these letters. Is the notice they send you is the opportunity to respond. If they name it, they frame the condition and the conduct. You agree by not challenging it. You lose. Your silence here is they win this war. Right here in the first paragraph, but more so really in your psyche, in your mind, that you just see this official thing that comes along spewing officialness, and it's all guidelines, nothing proven anywhere. Now, the rules they make up can be like law, but those rules have to apply. Why I touched on the commercial nature of this. Now, let me get to another thing to point out, and then I'll move on. Because they made an interesting statement following in the next paragraph. Is after a review of your website, it does appear that the complaint is valid. Well, appears is not fact, is it? This is just bait for you to agree. Oh yeah, if you don't talk about it and don't say, wait a minute, well, I think you have what's your authority to review my website and my communication protected under the First Amendment? See, what they've done also is the Supreme Court hasn't treated us very good, and we were crickets on it. They framed our discussions, our communications, whether it be by the press or just our right to associate and communicate, our free speech, we can call it, if we can call that, absent all government oppression, our ability to speak freely amongst each other. They have coined a term which brought it back into an adultery and under the presumptive authority of the government when they said we were in the marketplace of ideas. Listen to the term. Let's connect the commerce terms up. Marketplace of ideas. It's just not your idea. See, no, it's something that's defined by the government. And if you allow that, you agree to the commerce connection because your ideas are just marketplace, aren't they? This is how they do it to you in your property, too. They place a market value on it. Your property may not be in the market. And then the seated decision in the bar association, that legal association, the trade association. How would you like the butt wipe Trade Association of America ruling your life, folks? The one that lobbies Congress to make sure that they don't force that their butt wipe to be as soft and as it possibly could be. How would you like that? That's what's happening with the Bar Association. It's a legal trade profession that's been given carte blanche to decide your life sitting in the seated decision that allows these people that have made the decision that these rules that are mere guidelines and rules to implement law can be determined by these agencies to defeat you just because of the way they write their letter. That I am just astonished that we have not been perceptive enough to see, and we're crickets. And that is killing us. We think there's silence, while we think there's quiet in the forest and no harm's coming on us, we're just rubbing our little feet together to beat Hades, calling for our girlfriends or boyfriends or whoever wants to come along anymore and have a party because there ain't nothing to do. We're not under threat. We be crickets. That right here, second paragraph, one sentence long, is like 3 or 4 different administrative challenges you can make that I want you to understand is there for us. And this is in everything. I mean, you just look at any statement made by any official and you can tear it down just like this. And that's partly, I think, why a lot of them don't want to give you the written paperwork, because it's easier to see it when you're reading it than it is to actually hear these statements of question. These statements of opportunity to respond where they actually haven't proven. It says it does appear. When was the hearing on that, folks? It does appear. That's a decision. That's a final decision. When did you get due process on that? Would you have thought to say, well, show me where you found it does appear. Show me that where I was involved in the due process that came up with that final decision on why you're talking to me. Do you think they gave you due process? And if the answer is no, then maybe you've just defeated the authority of their letter, and they're a little premature. Now, what are you doing? You're making an administrative record. Because this administrative record will, if they continue, go to the court. And if you don't continue, they win, and you're going to be underneath this, and you'll forever now because you've capitulated once. Let me get to the next paragraph, because this is where the interesting thing I found. The purpose of this letter is to provide you with information about the laws and regulations regarding unmanned aircraft systems operations conducted within the National Airspace System. The NAS is the common network of U.S. airspace, air navigation facilities, equipment and services, airports or landing areas. Included are system components shared jointly with the military. The FAA's safety mandate under Title 49 USC 40103 requires it to regulate aircraft operations conducted in the NAS, which include UAS operations, to protect persons and property on the ground and to prevent collisions between aircraft and other aircraft or objects. Now, just quickly, without going through on and on, I look at the word operations, and they have a funny term for that. You have to understand, this is like operating a motor vehicle. You have to be in the business. You have to be openly promoting yourself to be in the business to operating commercially to begin with. And this purpose of this letter is to provide this information. Well, if they don't provide the full information, and I'm not going to go to the full letter, I'm just going to point out something here, because it's pretty quickly to determine just by the NAS designation of their airspace system. It was also pretty well designated when they listed system components and facilities and equipment and services and airports and landing areas. That all pretty much is not what you're doing when you're flying your remote-controlled neat quadrocopter. None of that's part of this. And the NAS actually shows that. So we go into what is this NAS system? Well, it's the sky has been divided up in operational zones. And let me get to the point of it. You know, it's all altitude driven, and then there's this space. I think code zone E or code E. It happens to be the space between all these designations, and then there's this code G area. Code G has to be roughly underneath around 700 feet. It has to do with the ground, actually ground level, above ground level. That's defined as the airspace that's unregulated. Now, unless it's just on surface of this, if you're not flying anything, regardless of if you're in it or just controlling it, over 700 feet AGL or 1,200 feet AGL, I think it is, but 700 feet I think is a cap. You are in what they define as unregulated space. How then? And this is where your question gets formed. How then, if you're even if it's operating that you're doing, even though you don't hold yourself out, you don't have a license, you don't have anything, you're private in private property, how do they have jurisdiction to regulate in a defined, unregulated airspace? Have I given you enough pause to think here? This is how they do it. They are imposing even over their own rule set. And if the rules are supposed to be as law, why aren't they recognized as the non-regulable airspace that they've created to come in and say that you can be regulated by this? No matter what they call your private property. No matter what they deem you to be. Because they have to come in. When you're telling you this is operations, you have a license. This is what permits are about. In fact, I don't know of any manned operator that comes under the specs for commercial operation, although all regulations are commerce. Forget that conundrum. That if you're flying under minimums, or within minimums, I should say, you don't need to get their permission. They have said they have no regulation. Now, where does that come from? That comes from your right to travel. They had to give you a space to so-called operate that was not regulable. Now, my problem with these drones is that you get these lunatics that want to think that your stuff is your life and what you do is available to them. To that extent, no, that's a trespass. I think your state law could handle that pretty quickly. But for the FAA to come in and tell you because you advertise on YouTube and then they make all these omissions to tell you the extent of their actual authority, and then they do the commission of committing a fraud in the mail, you're looking at mail fraud. You're looking at that's a felony under federal law. You're looking at that this letter is also the omission to tell you the right law. That's your state law felony. The commission of telling you the wrong law applicable to you, that's another state law felony. That's also a felony because it's tied to a mail fraud problem, a scheme and artifice under federal law. That's also the felony of the theft of honest services underneath federal law. That just stopping for yourself, and again, I'm going through FAA drones, and if you're thinking, well, I don't fly drones, it doesn't matter. No, listen to what I'm telling you. This approach, this method of approach is applicable to all demands upon you. You find the law that defines the limit of their regulation, or that their regulation has encroached too far upon a constitutional or natural right, it's antecedent in the government, and you bring this to bear on them as a felony. Show cause how you're a failure to assert that I have a right to operate in a place that's not regulated, has not committed the felonies of mail fraud by scheme and artifice, which is also a felony up to 30 years. If you're imposing force upon me to enforce it, that's 30 years in jail for theft of honest services for the proper function of government, staying within the lawful bounds. When you go to the second sentence, and you say you didn't give me the due process to come to a finding, they are already omitting that. That's 2 more felonies just in that sentence. It's a state felony, but you got to tie the state felony in, which is theft by extortion. All right, I can go on and on about this. It just ends up being more and more things you heap on them for imposing that this article does not talk to you about. Again, I appreciate that it's there to inform us of the notice that you're going to, again, this to me is just, you're going to, don't do this because you're going to get this notice, and so you don't do this. Now, I'm not saying do this to be a jerk, and I'm not saying do this just to test it. What I'm saying is that you have to have a better thought in your brain about how you see these stories and don't get wrapped up in the drama. I don't know if this Mr. Haynes understands what I'm talking about. He can make a formidable response against this type of imposition and be the one that shows us how. Every one of us should be able to do at least a minimum of what I'm saying. Now, you talk about, well, how does this apply elsewhere? Well, didn't I tell you before, if someone was to, if you haven't volunteered to be the status already, haven't volunteered into the status of paying taxes, and you get a letter from, let's say, the IRS, what was the first thing I told you to write back? Wasn't it, where did you decide? What hearing did you provide to me when you decided I was the person liable? Isn't that the first thing you do here after the second paragraph, one sentence? When you said in this FAA letter, it does appear? What was the hearing that does determine that you didn't provide to me? Now, where do you go for that? That's a Title V United States Code violation. That's the Administrative Procedures Act at the federal level. You have one for your state levels. They're pretty consistent, actually. In other words, you're living in federal districts, so that's why you don't truly have states' rights. It's what Lincoln destroyed a long time ago. If you could put this stuff together for yourself, you'll have a better certainty about how to approach this. Why it's not a question to me anymore that, I don't think it really was before. I just didn't understand how clearly now. I think I do appreciate where we made a failure, how we were cajoled and duped into doing it otherwise, and how they make it so easy to not respond. That we kind of got tricked out of having to do this, and because we haven't, they've gotten so strong that they're so bold as to take away all your law. And we got that out of the memo, the NDAA memo. And just as an aside, we're talking about Lincoln. There was a link, I think Gary L. put a link out in Twitter and talked about the pseudo-law website, talking about, is Lincoln's martial law still on us? And it goes through this proof, and interesting read. I mean, it'll go through some of the historic stuff. It's a short read, essentially. And it comes to the conclusion that the Lincoln's martial law is not on us. And I responded, I said, well, who said it's Lincoln's martial law? The Lieber Code, which it becomes international law well after Lincoln, is still in force and effect, so much so that the memo out of NDAA says we're not following even that oxymoron called the law of war. That it's still international impositions, the Supreme Court in the Kansas versus Colorado 1907, of which says that we always regard international law, says when you see these guys taking revenue, you can know you're under martial law, that we're not under Lincoln's martial law. We're also, as in Cowboy Tech advanced some information, I think it was a Barefoot website or something, a very nice list of things you all should go read. In fact, I should post that somehow. I'll go find it. It brings up everything, all the stuff I've been talking about. It brings up your Title 50, though he doesn't say it that way. He brings up what he does bring up is Title 1295A, that you're underneath these war powers. And as I commented to Cowboy Tech through the Twitter, behind Woodshed is my Twitter account, just to, whatever we do there, pass information, whatever purpose that has, more information to see, was that even even if we did look and see the war powers imposition through the 1917 Enemies with the Trading with the Enemies Act, which is what's reflected in the appendix of Title 50, which also imposes Title 12, 95A of the United States Code, we would be in admiralty, not nothing. And so this shows you how crickets, folks. We're done. I mean, as far as if we keep playing rubbing our hind feet, this is truly over. And part of it's allowing these little letters like this and these stories to go unexplained. The stream of information that comes out that puts some of us in fear to not do something. Some of us will stand up and not know how to apply, and then some of us, like myself, will say, "Listen, we do have a way at this one. We could be one of you could be the one that the Neo. You're the one that steps up and goes after this kind of a nonsense and actually tests it." As I was telling you, and to my almost my astonishment, he had the money to do it. He has the celebrity to do it. When Jesse Ventura was told, "No, you can't come here yet. Go back in and attack the standard operating procedure of the SOP, and maybe you'll find out what you're saying is the truth. But until you do." Until you get your due process, when you're given your notice at the point when you couldn't get through there without giving over all your blood and firstborn and bending over and being irradiated and the cancer caused, but when that was your notice that you had an opportunity to respond and you failed, we can't hear your case in the judiciary. For as corrupt as that is, he didn't go back. He didn't do the most basic thing I'm telling you to do behind the woodshed. This is the principle that seems to be, again, I don't like it, but we're in an administrative world, and we need to make the record that shows we're not part of it. This is how you do it. Now, how am I so sure about this? What proof can I give you all? If you just sit there and do nothing, what proof can I give you all? Well, I don't have any proof. See, when you do this, there's no proof, because the letters you have are the ones that shut this whole thing down, and it never gets to the courts. The proof is everybody who comes against is in the hands of the people that actually answer these letters correctly. What happens? What happens is they can't show that they didn't violate your rights that are required to be done and respected. And my amplification is you bring the felonies. In this case, I would bring the felonies immediately because of what these FAA things are serious impositions. When it's just a dialogue locally, I make sure that before we get too far into it, that they understand the next step they move is going to be a felony. But in this case, I'd come back and say show cause. Now, why do I say that? Because I have done this and it works. You do exactly what I'm telling you based on this. I'm not using anything different that I haven't told you I used when the Forest Service came against me and my partner and our mining claim. It's just applied. The same thing is applied to the subject matter area that the agency has that is interfering. It's the same thing. There's nothing they can do when you're making a proper record. In the administrative world that we live in, I'm not saying I like it, but it's there. You're going to have to communicate to the occupier until we throw him out, or her out, or it out, more likely. That fictional it, that this whole... Think about this, folks. A government having power over you? Are you kidding? A fiction? An ether? Something written on paper? Are you kidding me? Are we agreed to this? And I hear crickets? And now I'm hearing frogs that sound like crickets? I can't wait for the geese. Because all the animals across the land succumb to this fiction. It's a really fascinating... I can't imagine being in any better place to see it if that's what I was supposed to do. Because I'm here. I'm seeing it. I hope you see it. I hope you actually get up to getting to the point where we realize we really didn't do ourselves any favors when we continued being silent till now, and that we have a way to address this. I can tell you that so far, since I've seen this method of approach and having to deal with the administrative side, we've avoided In every case that we didn't violate some provision before, because this is what happens. I get the people that violated things, and we can't get the record straight, and then we got to go through this oppression. But if it's soon enough, and we can still throw in and correct the record, we can reverse the harm that the agency did in misrepresenting or omitting to present the law by what I'm telling you. And in every case so far, that is the fact. It will never go to court, and it's a proof all by itself, and you find out that the limit of government, and only you will see that. I can tell you that it's out there, but until that happens to you and you properly address it, you won't know this. And this is part of the ignorance that we have that is truly a detriment. That's why I try to I say just get involved, folks. Find the wrong that you need to make it right. Just persist until you make it right. Find out where the violation is, and stay on the point of what it was supposed to be. And when you start doing that, you're going to find a lot come against you. But you're taking the high ground and the objective ground, and that's the secret. You don't let the record be created that's not the objective ground. What's the objective ground? But it's the mission completed. It's the mission accomplished. The actual one, not the one that's feigned in the newspapers to send secret notice to the financial sector by government fools and puppets. The government's not here to help you, folks. You can hear that. You hear me say it. You know it. Those of you that's been listened behind the woodshed any time and had the mind to see this, that's why we're all listening here. That's why we're here. That's what we're doing. We just want to hear ourselves. Here's the choir singing today, the cricket songs. Oh, that's what I'll do. That's right. We've been doing that study. I think I've got it down. I've got to figure out how to present it. We found out, what crickets actually sound like. Maybe I'll pull that out. And then I had them just do some more analysis and found out what crickets really sound like. And so that's been kind of an amazing study. But we hear ourselves. We get lost in our silence and the bliss of hearing ourselves. Squeaking our legs and communicating that way, because there's just no threat out there. And yet this oppression's out there all around us to work against us. Not only does it comes thinking and trying to protect others, saying the fraud of protection, the excuse that it's imposing a police power that doesn't really exist, without due process to determine it. But you have the agencies themselves actually lobbying against your better interest to foist the government's outcome on you. And I say outcome particularly because this is a whole method of approach that is soft law based and is of a foreign imposition. It's the outcome that they want. Outcome-based education was actually a slip. They shouldn't have said that because they exposed who they were. That's why they changed it, and now they went to Common Core. The outcome is what they're after, even though within the rules, none of the processes are about the outcome. The processes create the outcome that they've already predicted. This is a method. You can identify it. And when you see that method, you see their operation. You see how it works. You see everywhere to subvert it. What's not so obvious, and what's come up in the news, and just to let you all know, something you're up against, the government's role in undoing vaccine exemptions that you hear promoted over. You see this big news now. I mean, this violence on people who want to choose for themselves. You think it's just a bunch of vaccine people or whatever. Well, it is indirectly through the government. But you think it's these people that want you to be vaccinated. No, it's the force and effect comes from law. They're lobbying the so-called law, your state legislatures. And it's just come out that the CDC is actually lobbying through this nacho front group, NACCHO. It's nachos, it's ours. This nacho group goes into your legislatures and lobbies with taking grant money from the CDC to push these anti-vaccine choice people to get this vaccine. Remove your choice to have vaccine. To have the choice to take the vaccine. This is government-sponsored lobbying. And this starts to touch on what I told you about when they went to a Gobzillion. There's really no one that can't be bought, it seems. And this is the real war you're under. We were talking about greed, and that's not a good thing. Boy, this is where that fits right there. And this is why it takes such a strong principle, I guess I would say. In other words, I divorced, if you will, money. I divorced value. There's a reflection of that. When you don't make it important, you don't have it around you. Well, that's the truth. But I truly, I think I can say this. I haven't been given an offer I can't refuse yet. And I don't think it comes my way because they know. I've made that decision, folks. There's just not an offer you can pay me to undermine the proper way to do things. In the more proper way. And I'm saying that in the context where when you do something, it doesn't hurt people first. It has no underlying motive than to continue a peace and tranquility. The greed, the reason for wanting something that purports to give you something in the world, this fiction they called money, these notes that tend to get you the creature comforts around the world, and maybe as you involve yourself, you even get more protection by it. The Gobzillions that now we see can come into the world told you that greed is probably the only thing that sustains this entire plunder. That you have to be one of those that isn't persuaded by that. That there are still going to be a lot of people that are, and these associations. Remember, the Bar Association is a plunder. The National Association of Counties and City Health Officials is a plunder. These associations are mere legal entities for political means and ends and control. That you have to know that's the fact, and that they have all the political clout more than you, especially when they're getting the Gobzillions from the CDC government itself to come and advocate against your better interests, and without your input. That supposedly is legal. And when you see this thing, when you see how this works, you might start to understand, those of you that are wired this way, to be able to make initiative, referendum, or proposed legislation that eliminates this ability for the government to do this kind of thing. I don't know. That's up to you. I don't focus on that. I can't focus on all remedies. I'm more into how do you stop the corruption now and lay foundations for the near future. While we work on bigger issues, like our lawsuit addresses, once we get that going, that's going to be an interesting, that's going to call out quite a many felons, I think, and people that are committing treason, for sure. We will find out how bad we are infiltrated and surrounded, as I've been telling you for years and years and years. But this NACHO is a federal organization. Its members are all local health departments, and somehow this is a way for all local health departments to be all connected together. Probably there is a rule somewhere that says that they should all coordinate themselves on a national basis. This was the thought that you might have by looking at these NACHO, but this is not really how it happens. And the article I have for you to read, it shows, for those of you that want to understand how you do this, again, follow the money. This is what happens in this article. It explains how they went about, and they found out through what's that form, a 1099 form or whatever the heck they have to file. At any rate, I don't know. I can't remember right now. How they tracked down to find out the incongruity in the filing. To find out and finally track back that says that the CDC itself is the one that's legislating in your states to come after people that are so-called anti-vaccine or, can I say, pro-choice? How about that? How come pro-choice in one part of life is fine, but not over here? Why is the CDC such an intruder? Why can they work through a front straw man organization? That should be outlawed, simply. And we have the power as the people to go ahead and do that. And if you think creatively, you'll be able to do it in a way that looks way into the future to make sure it can't be changed. I'm not talking about just as obviously as outlawing that change. I'm saying that there's a way that you support your rule that supports the people and in the police power. Why? That makes it almost impossible to change unless someone who wants to change it can show a better police power need. And all I've just explained there, if you know, is the public domain disposals. When they come against that, the governments have to show that they had a better need against their agreement and acceptance of how Congress disposed that land. People don't understand how powerful this law of the land, the literal land, is when you look at it in the context of compact agreements and obligations between the governments for land. We only have the notion that we've been told that we only have real property, which is subject to all the controls, because it's a property held less than complete and exclusive. And we give that over without a fight. We just file our papers without making the question. And now the question is so obscured that people are to the point that they may not know it. And I hope you appreciate what I was doing here with that one little letter. I only got into the top 3 paragraphs. I could have wrote a page of challenges. I could have outed them on a dozen felonies. Just in the first 3 paragraphs of the letter. I could have reserved the rest for discussion till later. If they haven't given me due process, this letter is not proper. This is not notice. You challenge the notice. That's the other thing I forgot to mention. I'll do it right now. You challenge the sufficiency of the notice, and you do it where they determine something without due process to file the notice. I hope you understand what I just said, not thinking that you're all dumb to not hear it. You got to really pay attention on this one. You challenge the notice for not fulfilling the requirements to be a notice prior for the content that was in the notice. In other words, as I pointed out, why I pointed out the second sentence in a single line. I think that's a highlight statement. They're trying to see if you're paying attention. They made a finding without due process. You need to challenge the notice on the failure of the due process to make the finding. The due process under APA requires full trials, hearings and everything to make that determination. That notice is not valid in law. You can agree to it by not answering it or getting involved, or you can challenge that outright. And this is what we do as well. In fact, we have a segregation of minerals, 6 pages, folks. Theirs is a 1-page notice. I didn't realize it was going to be quite this much work. It ends up, I've got 6 pages of response based in the law they ignored that makes that notice not even valid. Now, why did I go to a whole lot, like 6 pages? Well, because we're in the momentum period. We have to show so much more to shut this down that I wanted to make sure that the first response to that notice not being good delineated for them everything that we could find. Not everything, not even everything. A lot of the things that they overlooked that they were required to do. Because I'm also a teacher to them when they do this, despite the fact that they're criminals and I know it. In other words, now that you write the notice and you delineate what they were supposed to do, now it's on the record what they didn't do. And if they're going to continue, what they have to go do. I hope, folks, I hope you're following what I'm saying. This works out very efficiently. Even though I've had to spend hours and hours to put a response to a process, a violation together, that's a whole lot more than I had thought. I'm able to delineate and educate myself as well to how these processes are. And I tell you, as we go through this, and I do this, and if you do this, you'll learn how extensive the government's actions have to be to fulfill the obligations of the Congress, the obligations of the executive, the obligations preparing for the judiciary, to show that they have acted within the law. This is all we're talking about. But to sit back and say, oh, I got nothing to do, folks, I got people, I need researchers. If you think you got nothing to do, I need researchers. Can you do that? If you don't know what to do, I know what to do with your work. And I'm not necessarily asking. What I'm saying is there's a place for everybody in all of this once you see how this works out. Now, together with the CDC, we've all been told about how nasty it is, how that's incestuously tied to industry and corporations. That's unknown now. Again, the seeds of future crops comes in. The acceptance is built into news. The notice they give you to draw down and eliminate your resistance was another neat little story I thought last night that popped up that I wanted you to become aware of. That I think is tied to Monsanto and dye chemical and all these other, pharma chemical companies that everybody's incestuously tied with for nothing more than profit. That this story comes out of evolutionary tree. Humans may have evolved with plant genes, study claims. Humans may have evolved with plant genes, study claims. Well, not much of a study if they have a may, but listen to the connection that they're making with plant genes in humans. Now, I'm of a theory that the creator of all that we know, and I don't know about all we don't know, but all that we know, I think I've been coming to the conclusion that, there's a genius behind that. If you make all the organisms 99% the same, and the only distinction you need to do is the last 1%, you don't have many genes to deal with to make major changes on basic structural, basic environmental and structural proofs. So if I use the same, if I'm a designer and I find a bacterium needs to have this cell, and that cell can work it works in billions and trillions of other organisms, I'm going to use that cell. It's a foundational cell, like proteins and things. It has to have a cell wall. Let's put a couple cells together. Let's put more cells together in clusters. Let's make them do so. Let's make this one beat. And now if I can put that beating heart now into all these, look at all the other forms that come around that little pump. Now, I'm doing some really foundational and fundamental design that can go from one design model through the others. That would make it look like evolution, but it's actually just a really smart engineer and creator, right? I don't see how I would be able to tell from my little perspective, my puny perspective, how to be able to see the difference. But when you start to be able to tie in all these, then it's real easy for someone to adulterate that and say, yeah, you're made of plants too. Well, how would you know? I mean, if the sequences all the structures were made between the two organisms, and the only distinction between the chlorophyll and blood is the core molecule or the core element, iron in a man or woman, and magnesium in chlorophyll. That's the only that they're identical cells. How genius is this simple design change and function for completely disparate-looking creations? That humans have evolved with genes of plants, fungi, and microorganisms, according to the consensus-challenging Cambridge University study. Consensus, folks. This is the thing we sued to enjoin because it's a corruption. And don't you think all these little parts that we can see could be evolutionary are part and parcel to every other design system that just looks different? In fact, these systems work, so why not use them in another place? We don't have to reinvent the creation now. I think that's pretty slick. When I came onto that awareness, I said, wow, how can you tell? And isn't that cool? That does answer why most of the creatures that we see around are different, but the same. Most of the functions of the systems work in this environment. And so let's use them for every critter that's in that environment. We don't have many things to change except for the outward skin, if you will. Its function. But there's a consensus-challenging university study that finds exactly what they'd look at and see. Now, they're trying to tie in that you have plant DNA in you. Why? Because I think they're planting the seed that says, and we've talked about it behind the woodshed, about the gut bacteria, genetic, transgenetic transformations that are going on, where you're transferring plant GMO technology genes in through bacteria into your own system and changing your DNA by that function. This is trying to get you to believe that that's cool and that's okay. It is now accepted in some quarters that up to 1% of our genome could have originated in plants by way of horizontal gene transfer, or HGT. They give it all these names to make it legitimate. A complex process in which particular bacteria transfer information about DNA. Isn't that talking about the gut bacteria problem? This is just explaining to you what Monsanto knew when they started putting in all these GMOs to get you into your body, and the process that they don't want actually everyone to know about, that in the future it's going to be, oh yeah, your plant, you got plant genetics, you got caterpillar genetics. Oh yeah, you exude this toxin too just because you have a caterpillar gene. So it's a good thing the birds don't eat you, because they would die. Oh, well, the baby that has one eye and one arm, don't worry about that. That's it. That's because you were really going back. You're moving back to a more efficient mode of transportation that the slug uses. Don't worry about it. You got slug genes in you. You hear in this statement that horizontal genetic transfer. That is, boy, that's when I was almost shocked when I read that they're just agreeing that that's okay in your future. The Department of Chemical Engineering and Biotechnology and Alistair Crisp, apparently Alistair Crisp Crowley, maybe. Crowley skin. This is the first study to show how widely horizontal gene transfer occurs in animals, including humans, giving rise to tens or hundreds of active foreign genes. This is the first study that shows you that the Monsanto products are doing this, is what this is. Underneath the cloak that, oh, you have some genes from a plant in you. It goes on to say, surprisingly, far from being a rare occurrence, it appears that this has contributed to the evolution of many, perhaps all, and that the process is ongoing. We may need to reevaluate how we think about evolution. Oh, you think they should have did that before they made GMOs that would do this through your gut bacteria and cause genetic changes in you? Now maybe you understand all these genetic changes they're finding, and it's in the news, maybe because it's proving this problem out. I hope you're afraid to death on this. Maybe not quite to death. Put in a stupor for a little while, come out, and now you're going to be going after this. This is a serious admission that is happening, going to be told to you that's happening, and going to be your future, and the future of your little ones. This consensus is that system, giving you the notice of where it's going to go and what it intends to be doing. This was an almost terrifying type story in one regard. I guess I don't get terrified, because now that, to me, it's just notice. Okay, it's up to us now. Your silence allows this in. When you grow that third arm, and it looks pretty out the front of your chest, and that looks pretty handy when you need that extra arm, that extra hand, consider truly what's actually gone on there. And if you don't get that third arm, don't think it's not happening to your little ones. Or maybe to your health as you move in, as your system, your natural system fights these foreign agents in your system. Again, I could not tell, a very genius creator could make a nice modular package for all systems that simply puts a different cover on all of them, that to me, that I could not tell whether or not that was planned, or whether it really evolved. And that's why we have these parts that look like other species and creatures. I couldn't tell. But now they're using it, putting it in your psyche, just to expect these mutations, folks. I wondered about these indigo children, and now it's become autism. This is all to get us to embrace, our child is different. My ward of the state, it's a little different. That's okay, because it's exceptional. 6 examples of federal government overreach as we move toward total takeover of individual and states' rights. Now, this harkens us back to Lincoln again. It was an article on Lew Rockwell, and again, I don't study all these people, who they are, where they are. I just study the concept, and again, the title tells me a ton. It's not toward total takeover, folks. It happened. Lincoln destroyed the United States as a set of federated countries. What we talked about earlier becomes Lieber Code. You know them by what they do underneath martial law to be the martial law that you live under, or as we could see, as enforced through the Trade with the Enemy Act, which becomes the 1933 obfuscation of everything. The cripple in Roosevelt that crippled the American way almost conclusively, to the point we do have this administrative imposition that we have not been states, as you know it, for a long time. And so I, in a way, I pity the awareness of that in people that are 10th Amendment rights people. Not because I pity them. I just when you finally see this truth, your expectation for all of this goes to zero, and you say, well, we better decide to rebuild, or else this is where it's going, and it isn't what we thought. This is not toward takeover. The takeover has happened. They're just waiting for us and hoping, right? I think they're holding their breath. That's why things seem to be appearing to accelerate. They're hoping no one finally notices when they get it all done. It's so very close. This article, though, was good to lay out certain subject matter areas that you might want to focus on to get yourself into a place to say, yo, that is something I don't like. Control on health care. How's that working for y'all? Control of education. We just found out we got a court case. Interstate compacts that go and enforce this control of education in Common Core are unconstitutional. There's your first lead. Control of all police, including local departments. Very serious, folks. How is that happening? They're going through that COPS program. Maybe it's time to kill that. Maybe it's time to stop that acceptance of these foreign funds that, again, the greed as they take the counties and push them down fiscally. They destroy them fiscally. They make a Gobzillion that nobody can get at, and they destroy you physically and financially. And then they say, whoa, you want some money to protect yourself? We have to resist. No, thank you very much. You put us in this condition. Why would we want your protection? That should be our answer. Because we can do it ourselves. Why do I know that? Because we've had to. I live in a county that it's got one or two sheriffs running around. And yes, I told you this. What happens? I told you this would happen, and it did. We had an influx of people that were trying to take advantage. Gangs moved in. They thought that they were going to go, and they took some stuff. Yeah, they got some stuff, no doubt. But guess what? Once people realize, it's kind of like Syria and the Shia. Hey, wait, we better step up and protect ourselves because the military can't do it. And we're going to have to do it ourselves. And they did. And they did. And that's what we did. And when finally enough people got used to the fact that, oh, this is real, and we are being beat down, and we don't have a place to protect ourselves, we all stood together. And you know, that doesn't happen around here much that I hear. Not around the people I know. And the gang's no longer here. Yeah, we went through about 6 months of this nonsense. We don't need the cops. We do it ourselves. We were reasonable. No one died. No one got shot. Just your united presence in the moment. Control of the internet. How states, right? See, this is the thing. Is it control of the states when you go to the internet? Not actually. But this is how you got to be careful, and they convolute everything. And getting over to, I don't know, do I get that here on my... I think I do. I don't know, but I better talk about it now because there's just so much to talk about, and I may not get there. This net neutrality thing, you know, this is the control of the internet. Let me put it simply this way. EFF, and I have now problems that I had problems before. Remember, we found out EFF was being grant funded by Google. And, you know, Google just appears to be do no evil. They did nothing but evil. So, I don't know. I try to avoid as much as I can anything that Google is. But they supported EFF, and EFF, after this net neutrality, this 400 pages that came out, I don't know that we've still seen the 326 pages that was the rule, or the authorization, but 400 pages came out to regulate this internet. And EFF come out and said, oh, for the most part, that's cool. It's a cool deal. Well, guess what? Once you agree to that rule set, you've agreed that they can take the internet, which is not on any thoroughfare, is not utilizing the public way, You've agreed that it's a utility. As soon as you take on the rule and don't challenge the rule. So EFF, essentially, impliedly accepts this rule without challenging the right to impose so. I'm asking you to consider that your challenge is that they had no right to make this a utility. In fact, the purpose under which the Communications Act, if you look at what they did, because under normal analog transmission, you have frequencies that can beat over each other, that this whole regulation was to keep everybody separate. If you look in the digital world, that is the design by the nature of the beast. It is all separate. That's why you have ISPs and numbers and MAC numbers, all these different digital distinctions that do not ever cross. In fact, they only start crossing when the NSA and the government gets in the backside of your machine and makes them all the same. So if you agree to these rules, you agree to the conversion of a free system that was made by capitalism, I'll put it that way, entrepreneurship and looking for the next buck on a model that the government needed and it's redundant model it needed for military. I don't really care about all that. It got way beyond in that, didn't it, quick? You're agreeing that this is a utility now if you agree to the rules. And you're agreeing that it's a franchise, as I told you before. That I do not agree with EFF on this at all, and I don't know what more to say. Who am I? You can follow what you want to follow. I'm not going to give that inch anymore. I may not be available to fight all of these battles. I do have to pick my battles. I tell you because someone's listening in that might feel that they can address this, that they're more technically savvy than I am or can be and more able to focus some of this, that maybe that's what you do. Instead of running away like Jesse Ventura on the SOP, Standard Operating Procedure for TSA, which would have exposed a ton of stuff. Remember, that's like running for a political campaign. You get the pedestal for exposing a bunch of nonsense. Whether or not you accomplish the goal, you've made a whole lot of exposure and intelligence for people that they may not have been able to have, which is what you see going on as well when they're suing the NSA and trying to get information where they can't get it from a FOIA. The states are controlled by economic control. Here we are again, as we were talking, the money, follow the grant money. It is it's the method, as we found in our lawsuit, that they didn't answer, and so they're now subject to the judgment and estoppel that puts against them that the EPA, through their solutions grant money, gives money to the states that is accepted by this corrupt cabal of people and climate terrorists and others, Green Gang Green, that they accept this money through these channels. That has to be stopped. And we're hoping, we'll see how this works, so how many criminals are in the way before we get to it. The injunction will enjoin the flow of those funds. That's a misappropriation of federal public funds as well as a plunder on the state treasury. We are not independent. It's already happened. Our lawsuit perfected in 2013 says it's not towards a takeover. The takeover has happened. Our lawsuit is seeking to enjoin the most of what we saw we could sue within one framework that I'm telling you is done. I'm not talking opinion here, just to say, you need to just go do this and it's the next free man on the land, crack the UCC code, get out of taxes, get out of jail free card. No, this is identifying all those people that put the plunder that makes us even have to think about it, and we're going to work to enjoin that. And we have this judgment by operation of law that says we have the authority. It's not our opinion. The enemy agreed. This is what making that record an administrative record. You get the enemy to agree. You get the felon to agree they're the felon. You get to, at least in the most innocent and honest, first step is get them to agree maybe they transgressed a thing that they were required and had a duty to impose on themselves. Economic control. Follow the money. That's a big one. But it hasn't to happen, folks. It has been happening. The surveillance state, well, that's part of the internet, isn't it? That's part of this ongoing thing, the control and the shutdown of everything in your life. But again, the surveillance state is towards control of the states by the federal. No, the states are agreeing to all this. And they almost have to. They're federal districts. There's a veneer of control. They're federal districts. There's a financial district when they accept grant money. Understand it. Just don't talk about it. Don't think you know on it. Go, and if you know this much is what I'm telling you, oh yeah, you talk about this, I know it, yeah. No, folks, I need you all to step up where you thought you knew and make sure you knew, and then approach this in a very narrow attack, and you do your part, if you will, please. And the article goes on and says, we now live in an Orwellian federal surveillance state. Well, I thought we were toward that by the title. Folks, this is not just now. This has been. Where the federal government can invade anyone's privacy and does without just cause. But just cause. Just cause, folks. That's why they do it. No just cause anymore. Just cause. I've talked to you about this behind the woodshed, months and months and months ago. Without just cause or legal warrant. They mass collect and can read and listen at will every text, email, phone, conversation, and internet history, Facebook, I'll keep talking, blah, 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 blah. Yes, that's right. And not to diminish and judge the guy who wrote that, and not to diminish and judge what the notice to people is. We can talk until we're literally blue in the face and have no more energy to squeak our little feet and be crickets. The consequence of everything, folks. There's an interesting little article. I think I have time to read it. I think I will read it. I think you understand. I've been telling you this stuff. I just like seeing people also talking about it. I'm asking us to go beyond, though. Get beyond having to come behind the woodshed and learn principles that we were denied. You go beyond by getting out in the world, growing up, getting up in the world, and then you go and you make sure the principles that were the good ones, and sure, there's bad principles too, but the good ones, the ones that really do no harm, the ones that do keep peace, that tranquility, that makes us want to feel at peace around people. We bring that example into the world. It's why we fought so hard to not fight in our lawsuit, to not fight and let minors, if you will, get all riled up, because that's what minors do. You get them out of their minds, and you keep them from working, and they got nothing but idle hands. They're going to come and they're going to find out why you interfered with them. Minors are just producers. Now, they're not stupid. They're the ones that create engineering and science and geology and legal. They're all their own attorneys, if you will. If I could say, maybe I've insulted some. They're all their own lawyers. They have to know law. So these are not some inferior thugs, but they tend to produce, and they're a special type of people historically as well. There's only a few people that want to go underground and actually work for all their life. Hard labor, literally. Now, machinery has brought it out on top. Machinery makes it a lot easier, but the people die all the time mining to bring all the material out into the world that makes our life nice. That we have that gets interfered with, and there's no sense to it. These types will come out and cause trouble. And nope, they're not bashful to bring a weapon to do so, to stop it, to defend themselves. And they're not, and they know as they go out they're going to take losses, and they do, and they still come out. But that we were looking out, we didn't want to do that again, where we were, and what happens naturally. That we decided, give us a chance to do it a different way, and that's been taking quite a few years. And we've been able to quell the heat within the oppression that miners feel, and farmers, and all the other producers in the world that feed us and keep us going as a society. And we now came out and said, listen, we're not going to let's not go to the barrel of a gun first. Let's go to that lead to that paper and see what we can do. Well, it's been some years, and we're moving along. That is what it takes, folks. We're trying not to do the Second Amendment style action, because it just gets us back to the Second Amendment in the future. There are consequences to everything in life. There are consequences to action as well as to inaction, to ignorance as well as to knowledge, to foolishness as well as to wisdom. Nothing we choose to do or not to do, say or not say, embrace or shun, is absent consequence, both in the instant we made said choice as well as from the point forward throughout your existence, and oftentimes far beyond. I believe we've lost sight of all this important fact as a society, and it is one of the handful of reasons we are in the condition we are in, circling the drain ever so precipitously, clinging to everything, whether it be a straw or a clump of earth, just as long as we can keep alive the flicker of hope that we can return to former glory and rediscover the righteous path we've long abandoned. The problem, as I see it, is that almost all of us do is hope. We don't act. We don't speak. We don't exhibit righteous anger as the grossest of perversions befouls what ought to be the most sacred of places. We keep silent, keep our head down, go about our daily labors, and hope. While we're all doing all that hoping, they're doing all the acting. And in case you haven't looked at the scorecard lately, we're down by a lot more points than we'd like to admit. Even our prayers are a cross between resignation and acquiescence, no longer praying for God's will to be done, no longer praying for his justice to shine forth, no longer praying he judge righteously, but rather just praying that the disease stop short of our doorstep, though it may engulf the rest of our town. We tell each other our tales of sorrow, even then in hushed tones, because we fear reprisal. We fear the spotlight. We fear being singled out by the machine. We fear being thoroughly chewed up, spat out, and left for dead. And this fear is what the darkness is betting on to keep us silent. The silence of the righteous is like catnip for the devil, and with each silenced voice, he grows all the more emboldened. Given what we've seen of late, this fear is completely justified, and the fact that Christians and men of substance are being targeted is not just your jangly nerves working overtime, but a present reality. As the children of God, however, we must move beyond the fear and by faith override the inherent need for self-preservation, for only then will we have the wherewithal to stand boldly and declare sin for what it is, knowing that reprisal is a given. We are seeing the consequences of silence and acquiescence all vividly in our society, and the longer we remain silent, the worse it will become. When the bell tolls and the bill comes due, we will likely be in a mad rush to find someone to blame, someone to pass the buck to, but will ultimately realize that though the blame can likely be spread around a bit, by and large, the brunt of it must be appropriated by those who chose silence over vocal opposition to the darkness, and who, having done the math, realized that going along to get along would ensure their comfort and ease far longer than standing up for the truth would have. Every man values one thing above another. We either value truth more than we value our flesh, or we value our flesh more than we value the truth. Our actions will speak the truth if it's our actions will speak the truth of it, even if our lips might not. As written by Michael Boldea Jr. Whatever your sense of God is, and whatever your sense of that is, I don't think I have said anything different forever behind the woodshed. We have to do this thing, or not, and there's a consequence. And this was just written here February 15th. And I just couldn't imagine how much more confirming it is the principle. Actually, it's the totality almost of everything that happens to us in this environment we find ourselves today, that's been given to us to do. And it's been given to us because no one before us, for as much as we've been told it was the great thing to be done, never got done what needed to be done. It was probably more talked about, and why I've had little patience for a lot of what I hear in a lot of places. Yeah, I've almost divorced myself from people in that regard. It's almost like it's not like I've got someone with an axe to my neck, but you kind of have a sense that could be that way. That causes and compels me to continue to work where I do and conform and narrow my scope of my action to these things, and partly why I don't talk much outside and be in conversations like I used to. I mean, and just when I thought, way back when, way before all this was made apparent to me. Just having conversations with people, having that barbecue. Yeah, I want to go back to that. I want to be able to live that style of life and more. But now we do it at a consequence, the consequence of everything. So I appreciate Michael Baldier's statements here. You'll get the link. It's on his Homeward Bound site, I think. Not familiar with any of these people. I find these topics, and they either speak to me or they don't, and that one did. It spoke to what we do behind the woodshed, what I've been saying. No excuse. That's the fact. There's a consequence to everything. And opening statement, due to your action or inaction, and it's long term. Supreme Court rejects cases on Guantanamo detainee treatment. NDAA comes present against here. The reason why I went to crickets as well was the Supreme Court abandoned its post to check indefinite detention through the NDAA. And when they did that, they opened the floodgates of tyranny, as I was explaining, and the memo confirms. Not even the oxymoron law of war will be recognized by these tyrants. These I don't even like calling them names. These people just need to be gone. You are going to have a consequence here upon you if you don't respond in some way. I tried to come behind the woodshed to explain ways to do this. Hopefully a lot better than the revolution of revolution. Coming back around, always coming back around to the constant non-tranquility, the unpeaceful life that we were supposed to be avoiding. But here they discuss this Supreme Court case. Again, so now the Supreme Court, if we didn't know it before, we know it now, is able to abandon its post and no one says anything, crickets, and we were able to sue the Bar Association, which makes up and comprises the system under which you exist, that the Supreme Court is part of and oversees. So this is not unknown now that they are treasonous bass turds. That's fish excrement, BASSTURDS. I try to keep it clean here behind the woodshed. The Supreme Court rejects cases Guantanamo detainee treatment because when you get down to what it's talking about, it's something I told you need to challenge. Why they're giving over this inability for people to defend themselves, which I told you was so difficult in the NDAA, was that the government relied on this fiction. And the appeals court believed it. Apparently there's no way to prove this, or nobody brought up the right idea to say, wait a minute, the reason why you're doing this is not substantial. It's a pretext. The appeals court said releasing the images could harm United States national security by inciting anti-American sentiment. Why didn't they address that? I've told you this is what you have to address. This is exactly what I've told you needs to be brought forth, is that it will do this and more to not release it. That the whole thing that is conditioned upon this national security is a pretext, a color of authority to allow for a deprivation of a constraint under limited government. This news report in one sentence, one paragraph, one sentence tells you exactly what I've been suggesting to us. You better understand to do. And we can get at this through all these other impositions. Don't allow an assumed authority like FAA sending a letter saying, oh, we've determined without the due process. It appears. No, don't let any of that happen. They will. This Bar Association will tell you it's your burden to show that there isn't this national security need. And I think I've seen enough in the news to be able to show that you can. That if you understand what this is saying right here, their only reason was for the images that came out that they wanted to bring to prove this guy was just completely abused and he's innocent in Guantanamo. That it would harm United States national security by inciting anti-American sentiment. You could bring the proof that to not bring it out is doing that. Notwithstanding, it's also a fraud to use national security as the basis for the reason of the objection. Please get these concepts in your mind. And if I'm short, add the more. If I'm wrong, markonthebeast@yahoo.com. I want to hear it. BYOB, though. Bring your own brain. You're going to be needing it, and I'm going to be testing you on it. This is not messing around. This is the time of consequence. It really always has been. But I want to focus this on that, and I wanted to get to that statement that was made a few weeks ago. I just haven't had a chance to get to. There's just so much to be able to talk about. And I thought I was going to get a whole lot farther down my board on my tabs. It didn't happen again. I'm not going to even get to that Chicago story, which is really not a thing I want to tell you about Chicago, except for maybe I'll talk about it in this regard. I don't even know if I'm going to get to it. I wanted to expose the Chicago statement where they're putting people away, off book. I wanted to show you that's the notice to you that NDAA operates, and probably has been. That's really all I want to tell you about the Chicago horror story, about taking people so-called off book and denying for any amount of time their due process or any other thing under law. That is NDAA in Chicago. Don't think that's the only one. I'm not telling you anything you probably haven't thought yourself. I want to focus it on a thing that's happened just last year, why I went to crickets when y'all went to crickets. And that's not a judgment, and that's not on everybody. Generally, societally, we went to crickets. And we have the obligation now. The consequence is if we don't, you're going to find out all this stuff is even worse, and you won't know how bad that is until you are there. And I'm just going to tell you, you don't want to find yourself there and then without help, as I found out. If you allow me to speak from experience to you. Because these people that we're dealing with have no scruples, no morals, nothing. They're monsters. I keep pointing out. They're literal animals with the collar of authority. They're too smart to be in the position. They can be too smart to be in the position that they're in. That they will do things to justify their existence. As this Boston Marathon bombing trial has been going on, FBI agent mistakes Grozny for Mecca in a Twitter photo. The story tells us that these people will tell you anything. They don't even know that when they're making their own the statements that the research they're doing is faulty. That they will go to a court and lie and think they're getting away with it. And a lot of times they do. And they're not going to be found for perjury. But this is what happens in your bar-controlled systems. This is quite fine. This is what I keep telling you about your internet security. You don't want these people seeing anything because they make up stuff. And then they go testify as the truth. That's supposed to be a crime, a moral crime, which shows you legal's not moral. Legal's not law. Law has a moral component. When you see moral things being overthrown and not observed, you're not in law. You're in legal. That's the clearest and simplest I can explain the distinction between something legal and something lawful. There's a moral component to lawful. And if it's legally okay to come in and make stuff up, you are dealing with people that have no moral component. I hope you don't think that statement's a judgment against people. It's an analysis. And it ends up being a fact, and it better scare you to death, because these same even amoral people are 55 times more likely to kill you than a terrorist. Another story, as we've been talking, you're 55 times more likely to be killed by a police officer than a terrorist. And more than likely is because you aren't feeling too clean and keen about him handing you a ticket of some sort or enforcing some law that he's ignorant of. If all of these details don't scare you to death and cause you to do something, I really don't know what we're going to do as a society, thinking that we were doing better about all this. cops across the country being disciplined, not for brutality. No, that's quite fine. Kill you, execute you on spot. A judge, jury, and executioners is what it means right there. You haven't had due process now for quite a long time. But they're not. It's not don't get stopped and disciplined for brutality. It's for not writing enough tickets. Now, where are we back again to? When I suggested to you that this didn't have to be a quota. They talk about the fact of the quotas, and so you don't have to be a quota. You just got to tell a cop, because he's not any more smart to figure it out. We may not need you if you don't write enough tickets, because half of what you write or more comes back to the agency here, and we get to continue to secure and serve those citizens and keep peace and tranquility. And these people that are revenuers under the Lieber Code, that not the federal government will not recognize any longer, that by definition, by the act, not the thought, not the statement, not the typing, not the letter, the act of taking revenues, Article 10, the Lieber Code, produces the fact in Article 1 that their presence, their deed, proclaims the martial law. That when you see a news article like that brutality is okay, I told you they have the right to beat you down. Only the most heinous act on the part of a soldier in the costume of a police officer will be accountable, as you see, and then lesser so. When they're taking revenue, they're proclaiming you're under martial law. That this story right here, that I'll have in the Blogcaster, explains to you exactly that point if you have the eyes to see. And if you're listening to me, you have the ears to hear the truth of what I'm saying. And I'm not asking you to stop there. I'm asking you to go research this out for yourself. Don't let my opinion or my voice be an opinion that you just accept. It's because of what I do and going back and double checking on things, it's the black and white comes in my mind. I'm doing a critical thought on it, and I become certain. What does certainty do? It removes fear. Not that you may not be accosted, because that's a consequence of taking action against a felon, or worse. But it's the certainty that your position, your statement, your principle is right. It's the right one. It's unassailable by whatever color comes against you. What color? We're not talking racism here unless we're talking about the color of authority, the class of those that come under color of authority, that imposes upon you, that makes you a colored person under law, illegal, I should say. They have twisted this around so much, we don't even understand that they're telling us that it's so transparent to us. They've accomplished the goal. They've accomplished being transparent. I'm behind the woodshed trying to explain to you how to rip the curtain out, how to pull the costume off, and oh, horror is what you'll see there, but that's okay. Throw a quick towel over it. That these people are telling you you live under martial law by the fact the cops no longer come to, they're not stopped to be brutalizing you, but they're chastised and disciplined for not writing enough more revenue tickets. That you should be concerned, as we said before that, in the other article, that Obama is pressing the federal control of local police. You don't have time to waste to impose your at least opinion, if not better, some law upon your local jurisdictions, whether that be the state, the county, or your districts, or whatever, that you show that this is an oppression that needs to stop. Finally end what's been happening to us. Thank you for tuning in today. Hope you found some value and empowerment in what it was. Stay tuned. Donate to all your networks, because that's what keeps my voice going and others. And we'll talk to you later.
Well, that's another lesson. I hope with today's information you can take it to those that misbehave. From behind the woodshed.